AM Racing will expand to 2 cars in 2024, and Hailie Deegan is among the candidates who could drive for AM Racing in 2024, and Harrison Burton is likely returning to the Wood Brothers in 2024. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're going to go ahead and start and talk about Hendrick Motorsports. As it was William Byron winning the NASCAR Cup Series race at Texas yesterday, he granted Hendrick Motorsports their 300th win in the NASCAR Cup Series. They are the first organization to win 300 races in the NASCAR Cup Series. Massive congratulations to Hendrick Motorsports. We all thought Kyle Larson was going to be one that was going to score that 300th win, but it's a massive accomplishment for William Byron getting his 10th career win yesterday as well. I think this is a huge accomplishment for this team. Hendrick Motorsports, I think it's within the next 10 years, we'll get the 400 wins of how strong the lineup is currently. I wouldn't be surprised in the next 5 to 10 years if they do reach that 400th win, which would be also a very incredible accomplishment. So nonetheless, massive congratulations on Hendrick Motorsports getting their 300th victory. Massive dub for them. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Southside Speedway. As it was reported by Matt Weaver that Denny Hamlin is interested in operating or preferably owning Southside Speedway, his childhood home track in Virginia. And according to him, also, the Dale Jr. has said Cars Tour would support it. This is really cool to see if you've been paying attention. Ken Schrader also owns I-55 Speedway, so he would not, and Tony Stewart, of course, owns Eldora Speedway. So I think it's really cool to see that you have basically drivers and former drivers as well owning racetracks and operating racetracks. So if it does get revitalized and we get Dale Jr. even supporting that, I think that is an incredible accomplishment. I really love to see that a guy like Denny Hamlin, yes, we all can like Denny Hamlin or not like Denny Hamlin, but I think this is a really cool thing that Denny Hamlin is looking to do, is revitalize a racetrack like Southside Speedway, which I think has been closed, it was reported, since 2020. So if Denny Hamlin can open that racetrack up again, that'd be really awesome and help with the grassroots reform of getting drivers up and bring drivers that could be like Denny Hamlin and bring him in. So nonetheless, this is really exciting and glad to see that Denny Hamlin is revitalizing the Southside Speedway. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Japanese Grand Prix. Before the NASCAR Cup Series race late in the morning or in the afternoon in Japan, the Japanese Grand Prix took place and Max Verstappen put up a dominating victory. And he won by almost 20 seconds. And Red Bull clinched the Constructors' Championship as well. Sergio Perez, of course, is the closest championship contender. And Max Verstappen was one among the many drivers who fell out of this race due to attrition and a lot of damage on that car throughout the race. Max Verstappen can clinch a championship early next week, or 2 weeks from now, I should say, in Qatar in early October. And I think there's a really strong chance and possibly that he's going to end up doing that. A really huge accomplishment for Max Verstappen. Congratulations to him picking up, I think, his 48th career Formula One victory. And there's a great chance and possibly he's going to clinch a championship in 2 weeks from now. Nonetheless, massive accomplishment for him. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Busch. Now, after the NASCAR Cup Series race at Texas Motor Speedway, Kyle Busch was really down on himself, and he says that he is a letdown. He says that the results are really not translating how much speed we have, and he's really disappointed with how bad he has been running, especially as of late. At the beginning of the year, Kyle Busch was running extremely well. In the first 14 or 15 races, Kyle Busch had 3 wins and looked like a championship threat and contender. But really, since the start of the playoffs, this team has been extremely consistent. He says, when we have really good speed, I push the car too hard and we end up crashing. When I don't push it too hard, we get respectable finishes, but we don't score stage points. And no, they understand Kyle Busch's frustration. He wants to run really good and wants to get a win a championship for Rich Schultz Racing. But we all know that the RCR equipment is not as good as like the Joe Gibbs Racing equipment. And Kyle Busch, regardless of how he ends up ending the year, whether it gets limited or not in the round of 12, he has had a very strong year in 2023. So regardless of what happens, I know Kyle Busch is disappointed with how things have been going recently, but Kyle Busch can take away from the fact that he has done a really good job this year. 3 wins, and he can win Talladega. They've had a really good Super Speedway program. You mentioned that as well. They've been really fast on Super Speedways, and I think Kyle Busch has a good chance to go back-to-back at Talladega. So we'll see what happens. I feel bad for Kyle Busch in a sense that he's not having a good year at this point, but you know what? I do think that Kyle Busch will get better, and hopefully he has a chance to win Talladega this weekend. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Brett Moffett. As it was announced this morning that Brett Moffett will drive a 34 for Front Row Motorsports in the truck race this weekend at Talladega Super Speedway. This is really, really cool. How much first? I love the fact that Front Row is expanding their Truck Series program just for this weekend. This could tell me that maybe they're going to expand their program to 2 trucks full-time in 2024. But not only that, it's really cool to see to bring Brett Moffett back in. This is where Brett Moffett started his NASCAR Cup Series career, or really ran most of the year in 2015. Obviously, did drive a few races for Michael Waltrip Racing in 2015, but a majority of 2015, he drove the 34 car for Front Row Motorsports. Brett Moffett is a pretty good super speed racer, so I think he's got a really great chance and a really good opportunity to win this weekend. I'm excited about this. I'm glad to see that he's going to be driving a 34. He's going to be a contender and a threat. Front Row's program in the Truck Series has been really strong. Zane Smith won the Truck Series opener this year, so I think they had a really good chance of possibly to maybe come in and take the victory this weekend at Talladega. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Yuki Sonoda and Daniel Ricciardo. As it was confirmed on Friday that Yuki Sonoda and Daniel Ricciardo will return to AlphaTauri Racing in 2024. Really, I think well-deserved for both drivers. Yuki Sonoda's had an up-and-down year in 2023, but I think that AlphaTauri making a major mistake. One of the biggest issues with the Red Bull Academy is they tend to cut their drivers really quickly. And then, of course, you have Daniel Ricciardo, who's been injured. He more than likely will return in a few weeks at Austin and Circuit of the Americas for the American GP. He'll probably return at that weekend. But good to see both drivers are returning next year in 2024. I think the team hopefully can improve. The team has not had fast cars this year. They've struggled at times. I feel for Nick DeVries too, because Liam Lawson, I think, has done a really good job. And I hope, speaking of Liam Lawson, I really do hope that Liam Lawson does end up having a ride in 2024. Because in my personal opinion, Liam Lawson does deserve a ride for 2024. Nonetheless, really happy for both of them are returning in 2024, and we'll see what they end up doing in the 2024 season. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Bubba Wallace. Now, we do have a couple of Bubba Wallace stories we're going to talk about in today's episode. But let's start by talking about the race yesterday that Bubba Wallace put on. After the race, Bubba Wallace said he was really disappointed with finishing third and said that the best restarter choked the final restart, and he still had, though, a very good run. Again, let's go and talk about Bubba Wallace's run yesterday. A lot of people have doubted Bubba Wallace this whole entire playoffs and thought he was going to get eliminated early. And so far, Bubba Wallace in the playoffs has been exceptional and been really good. And he had a very good race yesterday. Did he have the best car yesterday? No, but I think he ended up leading the most laps, 111 or 112 laps. And had that last restart not happened, Bubba Wallace more than likely goes on to win that race and scored a victory. This is a huge confidence booster for him, and I think it's a huge accomplishment for Bubba Wallace, the fact that he was able to go out and have as strong of a run as he had. He did a really great job, in my opinion. I know he's disappointed, but they can't take away from him how strong of a run Bubba Wallace ended up happening. So nonetheless, a great day for Bubba Wallace, finishing third. It's disappointing he couldn't win, but you know what? He's got Talladega, where I think he's going to be really strong there as well, and I think he's going to be a threat there. So we'll see how he does, but Bubba Wallace did have a very strong race yesterday, so we'll see how he can do at the last 2 races. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Texas Motor Speedway attendance. Now, yesterday it was reported by Adam Stern that according to him, TMS official says a lot of it is we went through COVID and people got used to being at home. But we had pretty decent attendance. In fact, thousands more bought tickets this year than the previous year. Now, Texas Motor Speedway, it's interesting that they're blaming the COVID-19 pandemic for the lack of attendance. You want to know a big reason why their attendance has been down? One, the racing product has been extremely lackluster. Yesterday's race might have been one of the better races we've seen at this track, but yesterday's race was still very bad for normal racing standards. If this is the only track that cannot put on a good show with the 1.5 mile package, with the next-gen package, that is quintessentially a massive and a huge problem right there. The other thing, it was 100 degrees outside. Why are we racing in Texas in the summer? Granted, there's a good chance we're moving the race to spring. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But the attendance, I think, was down quite a bit because of the fact that it was really hot. This was the hottest race at Texas Motor Speedway, or the hottest Cup Series race, I think, since the Auto Club race in 2007, where it was 110 degrees. That is extremely hot for this time, and that's insanely insane. That's the hottest Texas race, I think, in NASCAR history in the 25 or 30 years we've ran at that racetrack at this point. So the temperature played a big role. It's not because of the pandemic. They need to stop making excuses and make the racing product better, because that will be a huge thing that will help with what is going on and the major problems. Nonetheless, it was good to see at least tennis up. There were a lot of people there, I'll give you that. There were a lot of people at the racetracks. There's still a lot of people there, but the racing still was pretty lackluster, and it was not very good. Hopefully, it can get better in the future. And now we'll go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Bubba Wallace once again. Now, we've already talked about the fact that Bubba Wallace had a fantastic run at Texas Motor Speedway, finishing third. But before the weekend, of course, I kind of mentioned this already, but Bubba Wallace actually won his second career Cup Series pole at Texas Motor Speedway, and like I said, led 111 laps. And after that, or before qualifying happened, I'll basically talk about the goalpost moving. There was a meme apparently that came out saying that Bubba Wallace can't win a race. He goes on and does that. Can't win a pole. Goes on and does that. Bubba Wallace accomplish a lot of these things, and people basically said he wasn't going to make the playoffs this year, wasn't going to get through the round of 16, and wasn't going to get through the round of 12. Well, Bubba Wallace has a really good chance of getting through the round of 12, being only 2 points back. And he talked about the fact there's been goalposts moving because people are moving the goalposts on what Bubba Wallace can do. Whether you like Bubba Wallace or not, you have to admit he has had a very solid year. He's had a career year in the Cup Series. Yes, he has not won a race this year in 2023, but he's come close multiple times. He almost won the All-Star race at North Wilkesboro, finishing second there to Kyle Larson. He almost won Texas, had one of the best cars in the race. And he's come close other times like Kansas, where he had one of the better cars in the field and could have challenged guys like Kyle Larson for that victory, Denny Hamlin for the win, had he not end up crashing there. Bubba Wallace had a very good year, and people can doubt what he's done, but you know what? Bubba Wallace, if he makes the round of 8, that's a huge accomplishment for him. Already getting through the round of 16, making the playoffs this year is an incredible accomplishment for him. But I think it's more of an accomplishment the fact that he continues to move everyone continues to move the goalpost for him of what he can do, saying he doesn't deserve to be there, but he's had a fantastic year, and he deserves all the respect that in my opinion, that he deserves. He's done a great job this year, and nonetheless, I think Bubba Wallace has done what he needs to do and continues to do great things in the Cup Series. And I love the fact he's continuing to prove everybody wrong that has doubted him from the beginning. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about charter negotiations. Now, every single time we have race day, we have this thing called Biz with Bob. And one thing Bob talked about that really hasn't been mentioned this week is that charter negotiations have finally resumed between the drivers and the teams. Now, why are they having charter negotiations? Well, a big reason why they're having charter negotiations is because the current charter agreement goes through 2024. The teams, they want to make the charters permanent because of how much they've invested. Charters right now are going for around $40 million, as we had the purchase of Live Fast Motorsports, sending their charter over to Spire Motorsports. They're basically expanding their team to 3 cars into $40 million. Obviously, with Andretti Autosport coming into play with Cambridge, that's a huge reason why they're getting that money, and they're also going to get a Trackhouse Alliance as well. They want to make the charter system permanent for that reason alone. NASCAR, on the other hand, including Jim France, doesn't want to make the charter system permanent. They don't want to get rid of the charters altogether. They just don't want to make it permanent so that they can have a way maybe of changing things up. It's a really, really difficult process. You have teams that want it permanent, and of course you have NASCAR doesn't want it permanent. To me, I really hope they come to agreement, because a lot of people believe in the industry, and the teams believe this as well, that there's going to be more money coming the way of the teams next in the upcoming deal. So they want to make it permanent, and more because they're expected to get a bigger piece of the pie. Currently, I believe the teams get 25% of that pie, NASCAR gets 10%, and the tracks get 65%. It's expected that teams are more than likely probably going to get around 35 to 40% is my guess. The tracks probably get about half that money, and then probably 10% is still going to go to NASCAR. The hope is that the teams can make it permanent. Honestly, I will have to say, as much as I'm not a fan of the charter system, the fact that these teams have spent as much money as they have, I think that's one of the reasons why I think that teams want it permanent, and I don't completely blame them for that. Now, the other big question revolving around the charter negotiations and the charter stuff is what happens if we have more charters in the upcoming deal. I would think there's a lot of chances that we see more charters come into play in expanded fields. We could potentially see up to 40 cars in a field once again, or 43 cars again, and maybe we get 40 charters. We have 4 extra charters for teams like 2311 Racing, RFK to expand. There's a lot of teams like 2311, RFK, Trackhouse has confirmed they want to expand. We know a lot of teams want to expand their organizations for the future. Some even talk about downsizing, like Stewart-Haas Racing. I think it's going to be very interesting to see what happens with the charter market and the charter deal going forward, but I'm glad to see those charter negotiations have started back up once again. I think that's really huge and glad to see that they have begun once again. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the 2024 IndyCar schedule. As it was officially announced this morning that the 2024 IndyCar schedule has finally been unveiled. And there's some pretty important changes we're going to talk about. First, St. Petersburg once again is going to kick off the season on March the 10th. A couple weeks ago, it was confirmed that the Thermal Club is coming onto the IndyCar schedule for a $1 million All-Star race, and that's going to take place on March 24th. After testing earlier this year in 2023 at the racetrack, it's not a shock they're headed to the Thermal Club. Then they're going to head to Long Beach on April 21st, followed by Barber Motorsports Park on April 28th. Then they're going to head to the Indy Road Course on May 11th, followed by the Indy 500 a few weeks later on May 26th with all the Indy festivities for the Indy 500 weekend going on. Then we're going to head back to the streets of Detroit on June the 2nd and follow that up with Road America on June 9th. Laguna Seca, which had been the season finale, is actually moving earlier this year and will be moved to June 23rd instead of being the season finale, which I think is an interesting move, but not a shock, but it's going to be a little warmer probably in Laguna Seca during that time. Then Mid-Ohio is going to take place on July 7th. Then we'll have the Iowa doubleheader on July 13th to 14th. Then we'll race at Toronto on June 21st, followed by Worldwide Technology Raceway on August 17th. Then we'll head to Portland on August 25th, followed by the Milwaukee Mile, making its return. It'll be taking that Indy NASCAR doubleheader away, and you'll have a Milwaukee doubleheader as two more oval races get added on August 31st and September 1st. And then the season finale is going to take place at the Nashville Street Course on September 15th to end the IndyCar season. There are some positive and negatives to the schedule. The only major negative for me is Texas not being on the schedule, but we'll talk about why. Texas Motor Speedway is more than likely to have the Cup Series race in the spring, and they need some time to repave the racetrack, and that's a huge reason why IndyCar is not returning there, unfortunately. A lot of people think Milwaukee is replacing the race, and maybe the doubleheader is coming into play for that. But the big reason why Milwaukee, like I said, is coming back on the schedule is because the Indy NASCAR double is no longer a thing for 2024. It's disappointing that's not happening, but again, I'm not surprised. Was expected. Maybe the Truck Series goes there, but it sounds like the Truck Series ain't going back to Milwaukee next year either. I think it's a solid schedule. Obviously, like I said, sucks Texas isn't going to be on there after a very, very strong race, but it's not a surprise, unfortunately. I think there's some good changes. I love they're going to be going to Thermal Club. Not a surprise there. I think it's a very solid schedule. I will say I wish there were a little more West Coast tracks like Phoenix, maybe some Pocono on there as well. There's a lot of Midwest tracks on there, so it's an interesting schedule nonetheless, and I do think the IndyCar schedule is very, very solid. It's not fantastic, but I think it's a very good schedule. I give it probably an 8 out of 10. I wish Texas was on there so we have another big Super Speedway oval, but it is nonetheless, I think it's a solid schedule overall, and glad to see all the tracks that are added. I think it is still a very solid schedule nonetheless. I think the schedule is pretty good, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about North Wilkesboro. Now, last night, Adam Stern reported after the NASCAR Cup Series race that according to him, new NC budget allocates $4 million to SMI for bringing NASCAR back to North Wilkesboro. SMI is also committed for having 2 NASCAR events the following season. There's speculation about the track hosting the All-Star race again in 2024. Obviously, there's been a lot of talk about North Wilkesboro. There's been a couple rumors going around North Wilkesboro. The main rumor that we've been hearing when it comes to North Wilkesboro is it might take the Easter date in 2024, meaning that it will most likely have a points-paying date in 2024. But also it's noted that they could host the All-Star race. There's a really strong chance and possibility that we're going to end up having 2 dates at North Wilkesboro in 2024. There's also been rumors about Richmond potentially having a doubleheader next year as well. But it's interesting to me that there's a lot of talk about them potentially having the All-Star race once again in the 2024 season. Look, I think North Wilkesboro, I love we brought it back this year in 2023. I think it was an okay race. It wasn't great by any stretch of imagination. I blame the car more than anything else because I think if we had the Gen 6 car in North Wilkesboro, I think the race would have been a hell of a lot better. There's been rumors about Rockingham as well, potentially getting the All-Star race as well. However, I think those talks have kind of quelled at the moment. They do want to return next year, but it sounds like that ain't happening. So There's been other rumors of maybe Bristol getting it, but it sounds like at this point Norfolk Wilkesboro may get the All-Star race. As much as I really want Norfolk Wilkesboro back, I'd rather just have one date. In my personal opinion, I think adding too many dates at some of these tracks could be a major, major issue. Yes, attendance ain't going to be a major problem because you don't have as many seats in Norfolk Wilkesboro, and people are going to show up to the racetrack regardless of what ends up happening because people are going to support no matter what. You look at the All-Star race earlier this year, it got a lot of support and a lot of people ended up watching. But for it being an All-Star race, it did not do good in the TV ratings. I don't know why they didn't televise the race on Fox. They televised the truck race on Fox, but didn't televise the Cup Series race on Fox, which really shocked me and was really, really surprising that they did not end up doing that. Nonetheless, in my opinion, I really would love seeing Norfolk Wilkesboro back on the Cup Series schedule, the points paying race next year. So there could be 2 dates in 2024, which is very, very interesting. Obviously, the 2024 schedule has not been released yet at this point. We're still waiting on that currently at the moment. There's a couple things holding that schedule from being released currently at the moment. But nonetheless, it looks like Norfolk Wilkesboro is a great chance and possibility that it could be hosting not only maybe just a points-paying date next year, but there's a really strong chance and possibility it could be hosting the All-Star race once again in 2024, which I think is very fascinating and very interesting. Some people probably aren't going to like that, but for me, I'm a big fan of that. I'm definitely glad to see Norfolk Wilkesboro could be hosting 2 dates in 2024. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about RFK Racing. Now, it was reported from Front Stretch's Twitter camp, and I think Steven Stump got an article on this as well, that RFK Racing could return to the Xfinity Series in the near future. But Bragzowski said in that article that it needs to be the right opportunity for RFK to make the decision to go back to the NASCAR Xfinity Series. The RFK team has not been in the Xfinity Series, and of course it was Roush Fenway Racing at the time, has not been in the Xfinity Series since 2018 when they had Ryan Reed in the 16 car and that cursed number 60 car was on the racetrack, which is the massive reason why that RFK team shut down in 2018 because they had so many destroyed cars. They did not have enough backup cars going at the time. But this is not the first time we've heard rumors of RFK Racing potentially coming back. There's been rumors about them maybe having a Truck Series team in the future as well. And we know that RFK Racing wants to have another Cup Series car in the near future as well. Now, if RFK Racing was to return to the NASCAR Xfinity Series in the 2024 season, which I'm not saying that is going to happen yet, but if they were to return in 2024, what drivers could have an opportunity and chance to drive for RFK Racing? There are some drivers in the Ford camp, maybe Riley Herbst. They ran for Farmer Motorsports and have an alliance with RFK in the Cup Series. So maybe Riley Herbst goes there if he leaves SHR. What about Matt DiBenedetto? Matt DiBenedetto does not have a ride for 2024, and it'd be really cool for Bragzowski to give him a chance and an opportunity. But would Matt DiBenedetto want to stay in the Chevy camp or go to the Ford camp? What about a guy like Brett Moffett? Brett Moffett really hasn't had a top-tier opportunity in his career since racing for GMS. Why not give him a shot and opportunity? That would be really, really cool. And maybe Hailie Deegan, someone to think about as well, being part of the Ford camp. The question is, do I think RFK will return to Xfinity in 2024? I'm going to be honest, the factors talk about it. There's a chance it could end up happening. I'll mention another name, Frankie Muniz. Frankie Muniz talked this weekend to the media saying that he's getting close to announcing his 2024 plans, and I think it'd be cool for him to move up because he has said publicly that he wants to move up to the Xfinity or the Truck Series in 2024. We'll look no further than RFK if they decide to move. Frankie, in my opinion, has done a pretty solid job in ARCA, and I think he's ready to make the next step up to the Truck Series or the Xfinity Series. Even Kyle Weatherman is someone I mentioned, even though he's not liked because he is a Chevy development guy, and he's going to be working the Chevy program long-term going forward. Nonetheless, I think it's going to be very interesting to see what happens in regards to RFK Racing, where that team goes, and if they do decide to go ahead and return to Xfinity. But I think it'd be really cool because, number one, you get more competition. I think right from the get-go, regardless of who they end up getting, I think it'd be really, really cool for them, and I think they'd be very, very competitive. Another guy I'll mention is Carl Edwards. Hell, Carl Edwards drove for RFK for most of his career. Why not go back to RFK and race a couple Xfinity Series races? We've heard that recently Carl Edwards has been at times interested in racing on one-offs. 2011's I'm on the team he's had conversations with. But nonetheless, I think it'd be really cool to see RFK return, and we'll see if they do return. Do I think it's going to happen? I don't know. We'll just have to wait and see. But I think it's cool that RFK has considered maybe making a return in the future. I think it'd be fun. I think it would be awesome. And nonetheless, it'd be very interesting to see what happens if RFK does decide to go ahead and make a return in the future. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Austin Hill and Sheldon Creed. Now, before the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at Texas Motor Speedway, Austin Hill spoke to the media and spoke to NBC. And Austin Hill says about him and Sheldon Creed's incident, if you watched the Xfinity Series race on last Friday night at Bristol, you saw the contact between both Austin Hill and Sheldon Creed when Austin Hill got really, really up there, and Sheldon Creed came up the racetrack and Austin Hill at the inside wall, and Austin Hill was not very happy. Well, Austin Hill said, we're good. We can handle it like men. We're not Sam Mayer by any means. And that's what he said when it comes to him and Sheldon Creed. And according to what the report said, I think Dustin Long and Daniel McFadden were the ones who reported on this well on Twitter. According to them, he basically said that they did chat on Monday and said things are good. One thing I know about Sheldon Creed and Austin Hill is they're both, I believe, really, really good friends. And they've been friends really throughout the last couple years because they've been teammates for the last 2 seasons. I think Sheldon Creed has also admitted that he was at fault for the crash and for the mistake on the racetrack that ended up happening. But in my opinion, when it comes to that, it does happen. Sometimes you make mistakes. It's kind of similar to what Kyle Busch did to Martin Truex Jr. in 2018 at Bristol with the contact right there. But it's interesting to me that Austin Hill kind of jabbed at Sam Mayer. This is now the second time this year that we've seen Austin Hill jab at Sam Mayer. Remember, Austin Hill jabbed at him after Watkins Glen when Sam Mayer, of course, won that race in Watkins Glen after getting the back of Ty Gibbs, which I don't know why Austin Hill was mad at Sam Mayer. Sam Mayer did not cause Austin Hill to crash. So it's interesting to me that I think Austin Hill may be in Sam Mayer's head just a little bit because Sam Mayer's been having a pretty good year this year in his second year in the Xfinity Series. Well, it's actually third year in Xfinity. It's like a full-time season, but his third year in the Xfinity Series. And it's interesting to me that Austin Hill kind of feels a little jealous of this, maybe a little bit sus, even though Austin Hill has had a better year. Nonetheless, it's interesting to see that you kind of see the jabs that Austin Hill is kind of putting at Sam Mayer for a moment. It continues, and I think that, do I think they both will probably need to talk to each other because at some point it's getting ridiculous. Nonetheless, interesting to see that Austin Hill kind of also tried to call Sam Mayer in that situation. Again, it's good to see, though, that Sheldon Creed and Sam Mayer, Sheldon Creed and Austin Hill are at least on good terms because, again, you don't want teammates going after each other. There was a lot of teammate-on-teammate violence in the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at Bristol Motor Speedway, but in my opinion, I think it was very good to see both of them on talking terms and no major issues between both the drivers. Good to see that nothing really seems like it's going to be coming bad when it comes to this. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story in today's episode as we're talking about silly season. Now, there's been a lot of talk about silly season over the last couple months, and Peter Strada from TSJ Sports put out a really good article in regards to some things that revolve around silly season. First, he talks about Aric Almirola, and it sounds like Aric Almirola is weighing his options about potentially returning in 2024. We talked about this a few weeks ago, or actually earlier in the week, last week I should say, where it sounds like Aric Almirola could retire at the end of 2023. But Zane Smith no longer in the cards because Zane Smith is headed over to Spire Motorsports in the 2024 season in the number 78 car more than likely. Aric Almirola could make a return to the NASCAR Cup Series in 2024 with the 10 team. But Aric Almirola has not made that decision yet, and he needs to make a decision really, really soon because we're getting close to that 60-day deadline, and we're almost at the end of September. And Aric Almirola did say publicly that he does want to make a decision by the end of September. He also notes that Ryan Preece is more than likely returning to the number 41 car in 2024. That is not surprising at Daytona. A lot of people had overheard that Ryan Preece more than likely will return to the 41 car. As much as Ryan Preece at times has struggled, by the way, he's going to be running an awesome Wonder Bread scheme at Talladega. But I think that Ryan Preece deserves another year at this team. He's had flashes of brilliance here. I think a lot of the biggest issues have been Stewart-Haas Racing themselves. There's also been a lot of chatter that SHR could downsize their program in 2024, but more than likely that's not going to be the case because of the current agreement they have with Ford through 2024. The next thing it talks about is AJ Allmendinger in Kaulig Racing. He talked about Daniel Hemrick, of course, going to 31 car, but it sounds like there's a lot of rumors circulating that AJ Allmendinger may return to the NASCAR Xfinity Series on a full-time basis in 2024. The big question is going to be who's going to get those rides. There's a couple drivers I think about. The first one who could get the 16 car is Ty Dillon. Ty Dillon's name has been the most linked to that number 16 car for 2024 because Ty Dillon more than likely is not returning to Spire Motorsports in the 2024 calendar year. We'll talk about why here in just a little bit. But Ty Dillon brings a little sponsorship funding, and of course, Kaulig Racing does have an alliance with Richard Childress Racing, which would be a massive and a big reason why he would go to that 16. A couple other drivers have been mentioned, one of those, of course, being Chandler Smith. I don't think Chandler Smith, though, is going Cup racing next year because I don't think he's ready to make the jump up full-time to Cup. Yes, in a few Cup starts he's ran, he's been pretty good, I will say, but I don't see Chandler Smith making the jump up to Cup next year. Another name has been mentioned is Matt DiBenedetto. Matt DiBenedetto's been linked to the Kaulig Racing team, I believe, for a little bit now, I should say. He's been linked to either their Cup Series team or Xfinity team. I think Matt DiBenedetto does have a really good chance of going to Kaulig, regardless of Xfinity or Cup. I think Matt DiBenedetto does deserve a good opportunity. Matt DiBenedetto always outrun equipment. I think he got shafted a little bit by Rackley War Racing, so I think it'd be cool to see him get an opportunity chance to drive for Kaulig Racing, which would be definitely an upgrade from Rackley War Racing. Whether it's Xfinity or Cup program, that would be to be determined. And then finally, Noah Gragson's been mentioned. Noah Gragson has been linked to a Kaulig ride, whether Xfinity or Cup ride is to be determined. He's also been linked to teams like Rackley next year and Thorsport in front row. Having teams been mentioned in the Truck Series. He could also go to the 16 Cup car, but that's not more than likely. But Noah Gragson could also be returning next year as well to Kaulig Racing. And then let's talk about the 77 car. More than likely, while it's not confirmed at this point, it's more than likely that Carson Hocevar is going to take over the 77 car for Spire Motorsports in 2024. Carson's ready, in my opinion. Carson's had a fantastic year. He has already scored 4 top 20 finishes. He's already scored more top 20 finishes in that 42 car than Noah Gragson scored all that year. He had a chance to score top 10s, and it's had the pace and speed. And I think he's 1,000% ready to move up to the Cup Series next year. A lot of people link into the A car as well. However, they're going to need sponsorship funding, and Sammy Smith's been more than likely linked to that A car for next season. So I think Carson Hocevar is more than likely going to get the 77 car for Spire Motorsports in 2024. I think it's very interesting to see what happens the rest of the silly season. There's other rides that have been announced that we'll talk about here later in the Cup Series and Xfinity Series, but it sounds like there's some rides that could be announced in the foreseeable future, including that 77 car. I think it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. And now we're going to jump on to the next major story in today's episode as we're talking about Texas Motor Speedway. Now, over the weekend, there's been a lot of talk, and there's been a lot of talk throughout the last couple weeks that Texas Motor Speedway has been rumored to have a potential date change. Now, it was confirmed today, of course, was said earlier in the video, that IndyCar is not returning to Texas Motor Speedway. Now, why would IndyCar not be returning to Texas Motor Speedway? Well, rumors going on right now are that there is a lot of talk that this race, the Cup race, playoff race, is more than likely going to be moving to the spring in the 2024 season. Now, exactly where they're going to move it, my guess is late March and early April is more than likely when they are going to move it. The big reason is because of the weather and the attendance issues. This past weekend, I've already talked about this, but the attendance was pretty good. However, it was extremely hot. It was over 100 degrees at the racetrack. It was like 110 or 112 heat index. And inside those cars, it was 140 to 150 degrees at the racetrack inside those race cars. So it was very, very hot for the drivers and conditions as well. That is a major, and massive reason why they're looking to move this race to earlier in the year in 2024, which I think it'd be a really good decision. I don't know who decided to move this race to September, especially late September when it's extremely hot in Texas Motor Speedway. And while it is technically fall at the time, it is still very, very hot conditions. So I completely understand why they're talking about moving the race to earlier in the season. But the other thing that's been talked about is the fact that there's a lot of talk about maybe a change in the configuration. As remember, for the last year, the track can change. And Kyle Busch talked about this, and he said that he could be reconfigured to an Atlanta-type track once again in 2024. Look, Texas Motor Speedway, we all know, needs a repave and a reconfiguration. Something needs to be done about it because Texas Motor Speedway has not had the greatest racing in the world over the last few years. However, I personally think that this should have gotten a treatment before Atlanta Motor Speedway because I think Texas Motor Speedway may have been able to at least be saved. I really don't want another super speedway type track. I think Atlanta has done a good job. At least the most recent race was really, really good. But if a track is not in good shape, you cannot change every track to a super speedway-like track. So I really am not a fan of them considering making this move. Like I said, this should have been the track that got the super speedway treatment. You obviously can't turn track into a short track because of the suites back there and also the big Haas TV. You can't change that. You can't turn into like a shorter oval. You can't turn into like a 3-mile super speedway. So you have to do something with the track, and that's why they're considering that. What I would love to see, though, in my opinion, is go back to the old configuration before 2017. The configuration they had in 2016, in my opinion, put on some really awesome and some great racing. There was good racing at times. Yes, I think both races were maybe a little lackluster in Cup. But you go back 2015, he had good racing then. 2014 had good racing. In Texas before them is actually a really solid track with multiple groups. One of the biggest issues is the PJ1. It's like stuck to the racetrack, it's absorbed the racetrack, and the racing just has been very, very lackluster. And when you have the Xfinity Series always puts on great racing, struggling at the track, you know that there is a major, major problem. I 1000% agree that there has to be something done. I'm just not a fan of the fact that they're talking about potentially changing the track to a super speedway-like track. I'm not a fan of it. I think the racing is not going to be good in my opinion, and I think it's going to be absolutely terrible if they turn it into a super speedway-like track. I know they're talking about it. There's been conversation about it at this point, and it's disappointing they're looking to turn it into a super speedway. I just don't want to turn a super speedway-like track. We already have enough of them as it is. Even Kyle Larson said we don't need another super speedway. But something's got to be done about Texas Motor Speedway because the racing has been lackluster for it to stay on the schedule. So as much as I do want changes to be made to Texas, please, for the love of God, don't turn to super speedway. But unfortunately, sounds like it could end up happening next year. And personally, I'm not a fan that they are considering turning it into super speedways. I think the racing is not going to be better if they turn it into a super speedway-like track. But it might be a little better than what we got currently at the moment. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the first of two major stories in today's episode as we're talking about Harrison Burton. Now, over the last few weeks and months, there's been a lot of talk and conversation about the future of the 21 car for the Wood Brothers for 2024. And it sounds like that Harrison Burton is likely going to return to the Wood Brothers in 2024. However, an announcement has not been made currently at the moment. However, in the Texas presser that came out from the Wood Brothers this past week, that Jeremy Bowen said they were looking at to next year to improve and try to make the playoffs in 2024. Look, as much as people are going to say that Harrison Burton has struggled this year in the Cup Series and he doesn't deserve to come back in 2024, I will give Harrison Burton the benefit of the doubt. Harrison Burton is only 23 years old and will turn 24 next month. He is still a relatively young driver. And there have been times this year where Harrison Burton has shown flashes of brilliance. He's gotten some top 20s and some top 25s. And you go back to both Darlington races where he showed a lot of pace. He got a top 10 in the spring race and had a shot for another potential top 15 finish at Darlington before getting wrecked out. And again, Harrison Burton nonetheless has struggled in the 21 car. Let's be for real, Matt DiBenedetto was way better in that car. But also, to Harrison Burton's defense, Team Penske this year has just been way off on their speed because Wood Brothers get their stuff from Team Penske. And look at the Wood Brothers at Team Penske this year. Austin Hendrick missed the playoffs like 23rd or 24th from the points right now. Ryan Blaney's the only driver who remains in the playoffs, and he's been terrible times this year. And Joey Logano could not even get out of the round of 16, and he's the freaking defending champion. So Penske in general is way down on power and way down on pace. Now, next year for Harrison Burton, another big reason why he's returning to the team, by the way, is because he's got sponsorship and funding. When you got funding and sponsorship, you're more likely going to return to the teams that you started with in your Cup Series career. But next year is going to be a make or break year for Harrison Burton because it's going to be year number 3, and he's going to be reaching at 100th career NASCAR start next year in 2024. So he is going to be expected to step it up to the plate. If Team Penske's cars do end up getting better, I truly believe that Harrison Burton could have a better year in 2024. Because you look at Harrison Burton, I go back to a few years ago in 2020. Harrison Burton had a fantastic year in 2020, Xfinity scoring 4 victories. Unfortunately, he got eliminated in the round of 12. But then he really couldn't back it up in 2021, where he struggled that year at times, had some speed in good races, but kind of struggled at times as well. And let's be for real, he was not supposed to jump up the Cup Series last year. Remember, Brad Keselowski was supposed to stay in the 2 car, and then Hendrick was supposed to go in the 21 car for 2022, and Harrison Burton was likely going to go to an Xfinity Series team for Team Penske because they shut that program down after Austin Hendrick moved up to the NASCAR Xfinity Series, the Cup Series, I should say, to take over the 2 after Brad Keselowski left to go to RFK Racing. So I will defend Harrison Burton on that he got rushed up a little bit for sure. But next year, it's going to be year to step up to the plate. And I think Harrison Burton does have what it takes. I hope he can do it because he needs to really start showing things. But again, he's still a very young driver. He's only 23 years old. He's younger than some drivers in the Cup Series are jumping up next year. Josh Berry is like 10 years older than him. You got John Hunter's moving back up the Cup Series. He's 4 years older than him. And then Zane Smith is a year older than him. So you've got guys moving up who have a little more experience in the lower series, but are definitely older than Harrison Burton. So I really hope he gets to continue better next year in 2024. So like I said, I think he needs to do better next year. Now, a lot of people are going to ask and say, why is he going to be staying in that car? Well, you don't have a lot of other options available. Zane Smith has been available over a long time, but he's no longer available next year. Carson Osbar could have been available, but Carson's likely, like I said, going to Spire Motorsports in the 2024 season. And you've also got really no other options available, like maybe Hailie Deegan perhaps, but she's not even available next year. We'll talk about her in just a little bit. there aren't a lot of options that were available, and who's really left in the Xfinity Series? Riley Herbst probably staying with SHR next year in 2024. So at this point, Harrison Burton's the best option they have. And again, he's got sponsorship funding. That's a massive reason why Harrison Burton is sticking around with the Wood Brothers in the 2024 season. And like I said, Ford doesn't really have a lot of options available. Maybe Cole Custer, but of course they're aligned with Team Penske, and Cole Custer's probably going to go to that 10 car next year if Eric Almirola does in fact decide to retire at the end of 2024. So as much as I think some people are disappointed, I think one more year is well-deserved for Harrison Burton, but next year is going to be a make-or-breaker because it'll be his third year in the Cup Series, and if he doesn't show any signs of improvement in the 2024 season, then he's going to get the boot from the team, in my opinion, because I just think at some point Penske's going to have to make an executive decision on what they're going to do with Harrison Burton, if they're going to keep him around. If he doesn't show any improvement next year, I think he's gone, unfortunately. But it sounds like at this point he's going to return to Wood Brothers in 2024. That announcement still hasn't come. I would imagine that announcement is coming very, very soon, and we're probably going to know here in the short future that Harrison Burton. But I think Harrison Burton will show improvement next year because he's going to need to show improvement if he wants to stick around in the Cup Series in 2024. He hope he can do that so he can stick around and continue driving for the Wood Brothers long term, because he's a long-term project with the team at this point. Hopefully he can do better in the 2024 season. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about AM Racing. As AM Racing officially announced this morning, or actually earlier in the weekend, that they are going to be expanding to 2 cars in 2024. I believe it was confirmed that Brett Moffett is going to return to the 25 car in 2024. Now, the second number has not been announced, but my best guess is going to be the number 32 car. We've seen Christian Rhodes drive that 32 car in their basically their ARCA program and their truck program as well. So I'd imagine the 32 car might end up being the number they end up choosing for their second operation. Now, of course, AM Racing does have a technical alliance with Stewart-Haas Racing, and it's really awesome to see that AM Racing is going to expand to 2 cars in 2024. So now the big question that relies around AM Racing is who is going to end up getting that second car in 2024, because like I said, Brett Moffett is going to be in that number 25 car once again in 2024. Well, the driver that is heavily rumored right now to take over the second AM Racing car in 2024 is Hailie Deegan. It's no secret that Hailie Deegan wants to move up to the NASCAR Xfinity Series in 2024, but her options are very limited currently at the moment. Interesting thing to note that she has followed their Instagram account very, very recently. And like I said, AM Racing has a technical alliance with Stewart-Haas Racing. Now, a lot of people are going to question this move if she does, in fact, move up to the NASCAR Xfinity Series in 2024. Because if you look at her starts, basically her stats in the Truck Series, she has not done very good in the Truck Series, right? We know that she has struggled in the Truck Series. Only scored, I think, 5 or 6 career top 10s in the Truck Series. And in Motorsports Racing Equipment, you had all three other drivers make the playoffs this year, and she's like 18th or 19th in the points. However, I will give Hailie Deegan a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. Like I said, she has not had a good year in the Truck Series of Motorsports Racing. I really have been disappointed with how she has run. But some drivers run better in other series than others. And last year, something gave me a glimmer of hope. Is her run with SS Greenlight Racing last year at Las Vegas in the number 07 car. Hailie Deegan finished 13th and ran top 20 all day long, and she did a very solid job in her debut, didn't really make any mistakes on the racetrack, and was up front pretty much the whole entire race. I think she ended up finishing on the lead lap as well, or maybe one lap down, but she had a very good day finishing in 13th. Another thing that indicated that this is a really good move for her, if she does go to AM Racing, is the fact she ran a GT race earlier this year at Daytona, and guess what? She led laps in that race and ran well. And I will give her a little bit of like the Harrison Burton treatment. Some drivers run better in different series than others. Look at Harrison Burton. Harrison Burton, just talk about he's the Wood Brothers more than likely next year. He struggled in the Truck Series with KBM. Did not run really, really well. The first year he goes Xfinity, wins 4 races. I'm not saying Hailie Deegan is going to do that where she's going to win 4 races with an Xfinity team. And AM Racing is not a top-tier team. But they're more than likely, if they have Hailie Deegan in their ride, they are going to end up having more technical support from teams like Stewart-Haas Racing, and they're going to end up getting better. Because AM Racing this year has shown major signs of improvement throughout the year, and they've been getting faster and faster. I don't think Hailie Deegan, like she's done in trucks, I don't think she's going to tear as much equipment up as she's done in the Truck Series. A lot of people will say, yes, she's been bad in trucks, and I agree with you. She's not ran really good in trucks, and it's been kind of subpar. But I will give Hailie Deegan the benefit of doubt. I think she will do better in the Xfinity Series if she truly goes there. And I think that's where she's going to end up racing next year in 2024, because what other options are available? You do have Stuart Haas racing, but more than likely, Cole Custer's going up Cup racing, and Riley Herb Sliker turned 98, and Ty Majeski, someone who could be in the cars for maybe one of their Xfinity cars next year, but we know Ty Majeski is trying to struggle as well. You do have RSS Racing, but I don't think she's going to end up heading there next year. I don't think they're going to have as many cars next year in 2024, because CMR Roofing, they lost the funding from that. And then, of course, you have basically AM Racing. That's pretty much it at this point, because SS Greenlight Racing is a Chevy team at this point. So at this point, you look at what rides are available that Hailie Deegan can end up driving, and I think it's going to more likely be AM Racing in 2024. And I want to see what she can do in the Xfinity Series. If she does bad in Xfinity, then you can consider her a NASCAR bust. But a few years ago, back in 2019, there was a lot of hype around her. She ran really, really good in the NASCAR, basically the ARCA West Series, got 3 wins there with Bill McAnally's team in those few years. And you know what? I know she hasn't really done much the last few years, but you know what? I'll give her the benefit of doubt. Some drivers do better in series than others. I look at Noah Gragson too. Wasn't that great in the Truck Series, goes Xfinity, and last year got 8 victories and ran pretty good and got a Cup right after that. I look at other drivers like Ty Gibbs, never ran a truck race. Sammy Smith ran 1 truck race, done pretty good in the Xfinity Series, got 1 win and could have won this past weekend at Texas Motor Speedway. Jimmy Johnson didn't run any truck races, moved up to Xfinity, did okay, then he went up Cup racing and has become one of the greatest drivers ever. I'm not saying she's on the level of those guys, but I certainly think Hailie Deegan could do a decent job with an AM Racing team. And like I said, they're not a team like she's not going into a complete top-tier ride, but she'll be in a decent ride where I think she can actually do a pretty good job. So I think next year in 2024, Hailie Deegan moves up to Xfinity, and I think she'll be with AM Racing in 2024. I thought maybe RSS Racing, but I think at this point she heads to AM Racing in 2024, which I think that team is going to be expected to improve. You're also going to have less competition in the Xfinity Series next year with John Hunter Nemechek moving up in 2024 to Cup. Also, Josh Berry moving up, and Cole Custer more than likely moving up as well. So our competition for the playoffs is going to be guys like Parker Kligerman. Cole Custer's could be sticking around. Who knows at this point? Nonetheless, I think Hailie Deegan deserves a chance to be in Xfinity, and we'll see if she does move up in 2024, but it does sound like there's a great chance and possibility that Hailie Deegan is moving up to Xfinity in 2024, but we'll have to see what happens. I think if she moves up, I think she contends for the playoffs and does a pretty good job next year. So, that is going to today's NASCAR news video and Motorsports news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Links description below that, and comment your thoughts below on today's episode. Do you think Hailie Deegan deserves to be moving up to Xfinity in 2024 or not? If she moves, goes AM Racing. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about Harrison Burton likely returning to the Wood Brothers in 2024? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Later today on the channel, there should be the Truck Series race fix from Talladega. If not, they'll probably be moved tomorrow. Then tomorrow on the channel, there might be a small silly season update, but probably not at this point. We'll just have to wait and see. Maybe a schedule predictions coming out. I'm not sure at this point. Then on Wednesday, there's going to be a NASCAR news video on the channel. And then Thursday will be race fix for the Cup race at Talladega. Friday will be a NASCAR news video and a lot of great content dropping the channel over the next couple weeks. They can't wait for you guys to check out. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.